If someone asks me to do something, especially if it's like a non-ordinary state of consciousness invitation, and I can feel it scares me, my instinct is just to say yes and to commit. And so when my friend asked me, hey, do you want to do a 4-day, 4-night, no food, no water vision quest? I was like, no, I don't. So yes, I will. You know, a couple of years ago, I had a genuine extra or UAP experience. And it was that moment that like reconfigured something in me permanently. We were camping. I was laying on my back and I was looking up at the sky. I see the first star of the evening and I think to myself, wow, the first star. And then as soon as I think that thought, it starts to move. My subjective experience is that the light that looked like a star looked at me and made eye contact. Like that was the subjective feeling like of like a wild animal being like, as soon as I thought that, 2 more stars pop up in the sky, like behind it. And so now it's like 2 and then 1. The leading star does like a little twirl in the sky. And what it felt like it told me, like what it felt like it was communicating to me was,
you're one of those people who obviously you've been completely with me on whatever you want to, I don't even want to use the phrase on this journey because it's like just like that Hermes would just be so disappointed in that choice of phrasing. But we've just done so many fucking really personally impactful mind melds for me over the years. Same. You're still, you know, even though the audience has gotten much larger, you're still one of the top people. The people are like, when is Godsey coming back? When is Godsey coming back? So you always leave an impression on people, man. And I truly value these conversations.
Yeah, and it's so nice to have you back in Austin. And yeah, for people who don't know, for like the last year, I got diagnosed with spasmodic dysphonia, which is the same thing that RFK has. It's like it makes your vocal cord spasm. And so I've been whispering for a long time and not podcasting. And this is one of the first podcasts I've been able to try, you know, so I'm honestly nervous, you know.
There's nothing to be nervous about, baby. You're in the hot little hands of the muses right now, and they're going to just let it flow the way you need it to flow. But speaking of that, I mean, one of the things that we definitely have in common is we share this sort of mythopoetic worldview, and it's a worldview that I think has, this sounds so cliche to say, but in some, I don't literally mean like I would have unalived myself if I didn't have access to this, but I think I would have unalived myself intellectually and spiritually. You know, I don't think I would know what to do with myself. And you really have to work though at making that kind of a worldview feel real. Yeah. And that's one of the things I love about you is because you're constantly doing stuff, man. Like you're going on vision quests, you're going on ayahuasca retreats, you're going on darkness retreats. And I know you basically just got back from one of these things, and I know basically nothing about what happened. So yeah, tell the story of this vision quest.
Yeah, so like the first thing I want to speak to is the reason I seek out things like that is because I can feel the encroachment of the like lullaby of comfort that our culture is constantly like trying to push on us.
Yeah.
And I just feel like the world is in a sufficient amount of distress and pain that I don't want to be comfortable. You know, like I want meaning and I want a good story. And so I find it's important for me to get uncomfortable, like substantially uncomfortable every couple of months. Because I know myself well enough to know that like my inner voice is not idiot, you piece of shit. No, my inner voice is, oh, you've done so much today. You should just relax and you don't need to work out. And you've been eating so good the last couple of weeks. And so, yeah, to shake that shit up, I like to go do hard things, specifically hard things that have a wisdom lineage connected to it.
Yeah.
And like many Americans, you know, it's like everyone you meet, they're like, oh, I'm 1/16th, some type of Native American, blah, blah, blah. Well, of course, my dad told me most of my life that we were, you know, 1/8 or 1/16th, some type of Native American. And then fucking 23andMe came around and it was like, Dad, what are you talking about? And I don't know about you guys, but my dad was just gaslit. He was like, I never said that. I was like, Dad, we had a room in the house that was the Native American room where we had things on the walls and we had, all sorts of stuff. But so I've been lucky enough to have met a lot of elders, and I know quite a few Lakota elders that are like living lineage holders. And I'm the type of dude that if someone asks me to do something, especially if it's like a non-ordinary state of consciousness invitation, and I can feel it scares me, my instinct is just to say yes and to commit. And so when my friend asked me, hey, do you want to do a 4-day, 4-night, no food, no water vision quest? I was like, no, I don't. So yes, I will. So before doing this vision quest, I would get nervous if I was going on a hike and I started to get too far away from a trail. Like I could feel that I have this like primordial fear of nature in a way that kind of makes me feel ashamed. It's like, why am I so afraid of like untamed nature? And to prepare for this vision quest, the thing that surprised me the most is when I had to get off of like, caffeine, nicotine, obviously like no marijuana, there was nothing like that. And that was surprisingly easy to get off of everything. But there was also the invitation to tie 411 prayer tags.
What does that mean?
So it's where you get cotton cloth in red, black, white, and yellow, and you cut out 411 like 4.5-inch squares, and then you get a bag of tobacco, and then you get a super long string of some twine. I don't know what they make the twine of. I don't think it's cotton, but you take a pinch of tobacco and you put it inside one of these squares, and then you like wrap it up in such a way and you hold it to your heart and you actually like speak a prayer out loud. And then you tie it to the string, and then you have a very long string of these prayers, and these prayer flags are what are hung up around your like 10 by 10 feet square when you go out there.
Interesting. So it's kind of similar to like Tibetan prayer flags, or even in Japan, they have like, I'm forgetting the Japanese word, but there's a similar concept. Yeah.
I think it's fair to say that was, so the 4 days before my vision quest started, I was starting to make these prayer flags, and it took me probably about 5 to 6 hours a day for 4 or 5 days to wrap them all up. I think it's safe to say that that's the most I've prayed. Like in those 5 days, I think I spoke more prayers than the entirety of my life combined. Wow. Like actually spoke prayers out loud. And I was even like texting friends and being like, yo, I'm doing these prayer flags. Is there any prayer that I can say for you and your family? Like I was definitely reaching out to people who had just had kids and people who have, like children, because a big part of this initiation for me personally was to deepen the transition mythopoetically from young adult man to father, because I'm calling in that timeline. And I remember by the last day of doing the prayer flags, I almost continuously wept from gratitude.
Wow.
And I was here at the stable. And I was just so impressed, like as I'm crying for hours and like crying in a way that I've never cried before. Like I definitely know how to cry, but it tends to be like acute rupture and then like, oh, yeah. But this was like a continuous, like, not like tear, but like a continuous, like weeping almost, but not violent. And it was so cathartic. And I was just so impressed by like the psychotechnology of the prayer flag time. So I finish it. I then drive out to the place where we are doing this at, and it's probably about like 45 minutes outside of town here on like 120 acres of a regenerative farm where most of it is still wildlife. And there's a longer version story of this, but I'm going to do the condensed version. The condensed version is I get there. I thought I had picked a special spot to do my thing because I'd gotten out there like a month before and I had like prayed and I had felt like the spirit of my daughter had brought me to this spot. And then when we get there, There's two other people doing the vision quest with me, and one of the other dudes, like, vision quest spot where he already dug out his shithole is right next to the spot I thought I was going to have.
Yeah.
And then I just felt myself get incredibly triggered. You know, like, you've done ceremonial, you know, quests, and there's always like something idiosyncratic that tends to come up that tends to create a disproportionate trigger in you where you're like, what the fuck is this? I felt like I was like 6 and my older brother had like taken my toy.
Yeah. There's two things I want to zoom in on really quick, because one, when you're in consensus reality, you know, capitalist, creative game playing mode, like you and I are in different ways all the time, or everybody is like listening to, you have a certain frame of, you have a certain philosophical and psychological lens that you're using all the time. And whenever you do something like what you're describing, you're radically changing that just 100%. By doing all of those prayers, by doing what you're doing, by focusing on different things. Suddenly your mind orients itself in a totally different way. And that's one really valuable aspect of doing stuff like this. But then the second part is that's funny is that you prepare yourself mentally for a certain expectation that this thing is going to be like,
100%.
Even though you know elements of it are going to be out of your control. But the more you get into an uncontrolled situation dictated by nature, the more things are out of your control. So it's just funny that from the outset, something that was out of your control occurs to sort of just like shake the way that you're interfacing with this whole experience. So I feel like that might be an interesting first domino to kind of like set the tone of all of this shit.
100%. That's spot on. And yeah, like I definitely, you know, the prayer flags got me outside of that like consensus capitalist, like, you know, win-lose headset. But then I definitely entered into the headset of I'm a good boy and I prepared really good for this and God's going to reward me for how good of a job I've done, you know, and I listened to the spirit to pick the spot, and then I get to the spot and it's like, the thing that kept me from having that spot was that I could see their outhouse. Like I could see the other person's like shithole. And that's hilarious to me. So we were going to be starting the vision quest that day in like 5 hours. And so I had to pick a new spot, but you know, I'm kind of embarrassed to admit, but I was so like triggered that I felt like a kid. And I was just like, in hindsight, I was so disconnected from trying to even attempt to pretend to listen to the land, to be guided to a spot, that I eventually turned to my guide and I was like, dude, can you fucking help me pick a spot? I don't know where to pick.
Yeah.
And he looks around. He doesn't even take a step. He just looks around and he's like, that spot looks good. And so we go over there. And from my perspective, this is like the ugliest spot that exists in America. Like, but I was definitely triggered and I could feel myself like wanting to cry because there was this felt sense of like, I'm going to spend the next 4 days here. And I feel like it's not thoughtful. And I feel like the person who's trying to help me doesn't even care. He just fucking picked a spot.
Yeah.
But I could feel that the other people were antsy, you know, like the other people who were with me who were going to be doing the vision quest as well. And so I was just like, fine, fuck it. You know, so that's the energy I started this with. And I don't know if this has ever happened to you, but have you ever overdrank water, like to the point where you started to have like a physiological symptoms?
Other than just needing to pee, I don't think so.
Okay, so I drank probably like 140 liters of water, or not liters, ounces of water in like the next 3 hours. And it got to the point where I would have these like massive hot sweats where I would just expel fluid from my body. And I could tell this has never happened to me before. This isn't nerves. This is like my body being like, yo, this is dangerous, the amount of water. And so I drank that much water and then I ate half a steak right before we went into the sweat lodge, because the way this is based on a Lakota tradition, and the way that they do it is you do a sweat lodge to open up the visionary quest, and then you go straight out onto the land and you don't drink water. And then when you come back after 4 days, you sweat again. And
What?
yeah, and
Dude, that is intense. So you're not only doing a fasted and water fasted 4-day thing, you're doing sweat lodges on the front and back end of that with
Yes.
no water.
Right.
That's insane, dude.
So the thing that's really interesting is like every Westerner I know who I've told about this, who cares about me, is like, Eric, this is not safe.
Yeah.
But then I know dozens of people who are of the Lakota lineage and are of lineages that were influenced by the Lakotas, and they've all done this. And all of the response is the same. And it's like, yeah, it's not possible unless you pray. It's only possible if you pray. You know, so I have like 20 people who I know have done this. And then I have all my well-meaning Western, you know, like friends, parents, like mentors just being like, what the fuck are you doing? This is not safe.
Yeah.
So we go into the sweat. The sweat's nice. I'm eventually brought to my spot, and the way they do it is it's very like communal. So like a bunch of friends came out and we all did this big sweat together, and they carry all of my stuff to the spot and I don't have to carry anything. And then they use the prayer flags that I spent the week wrapping to like make like a 10 by 10 foot square, you know, in this ugly fucking spot that got picked for me that I hated. And by the time they were done and they like put me in, you know, it's almost like they treat the prayer flags like they're energetic walls, you know, because like all of them are super clear. And it's like you are, you know, because there's snakes on the land, there's scorpions, and they're like, they won't mess with you because of the prayer flags. And it's just like this absolute like physics to them. And they treat it almost like they're energetic, like curtains. And so like the dude who's the leader, he like opens up a corner for me and then tells me that I can go in, and then he closes it, and then it's set. And then everyone leaves. And on this first day, by the time that happened, it was like probably like 4 or 5 p.m. Because I've done the darkness retreat twice, and I'm sure people who have done something like ayahuasca knows exactly what I'm talking about, but it's like there's a parallel timeline where I'm still in the Maloka, and no matter how long I'm away from the Maloka, when I come back to the Maloka, it just feels like I pick up right where it left off.
There's like, sorry to interrupt, I just want to riff on this, is like there's a kind of mythic, almost non-chronological time when you're in there. 100%. And you and I have like riffed a pukingly vast amount on the idea of kairos, but it is just it is just such an important concept to bring up, because that's the best word for this. This idea of a time that is not made of sequence and chronology, but a time that's made of meaning. That's a visionary time, a time of subjective qualities. And yes, it still feels like there's a duration to it. Sometimes it feels like there's a very long duration, particularly when you're on a mind-altering substance or you're just physically uncomfortable, or both. But yeah, these are definitely experiences that seem to evoke that sense of kairos. And within that kairotic bubble, things appear, like weird shit can happen sometimes. Sure. And I don't want to forecast whatever happened to you or didn't happen to you in this particular experience, but that's just from my own experience, and I know stories that you've shared in the past where by evoking that or taking yourself out of the ordinary, that's where Hermes plays, baby. That's 100%. Where the trickster lives. That's where the visions have the potential to manifest and the synchronicities come. Do pardon the interloping, my friends. Can one interlope upon themselves? That is a brain tingler that we will save for another transmission. You may have noticed that I have shortened my introductions, yet tickling the algorithm, stimulating it in all ways does remain of the utmost importance. So please do like, subscribe, comment, share. Also, we do have an ever swelling library of member-only / patron-only content, both on the YouTube members page and at patreon.com/third-eye-drops. If you do join via the latter, you'll also get access to a patron-only Discord server and access to live mind melds with myself, occasional special guests, along with, of course, a number of other seekers just like yourself. I do hope to commune with you there, but in the meantime, back to the mind meld. And within that that kairotic bubble, things appear, like weird shit can happen sometimes.
sure.
And I don't want to forecast whatever happened to you or didn't happen to you in this
You're
particular
forecasting, baby.
experience, but that's just from my own experience, and I know stories that you've shared in the past where by evoking that or taking yourself out of the ordinary, that's where Hermes plays, baby. That's where the
100%.
trickster lives. That's where the visions have the potential to manifest and the synchronicities come, in my experience.
100%. And so it was like, as soon as I couldn't hear the sound of my friends talking and walking, it's like I instantaneously picked up where I left off from the darkness retreats. And within minutes, I'm weeping. And it's because, at least in my experience, what I've learned is that the darkness retreat is a fundamentally different type of initiatory experience than anything that involves ingesting a psychedelic.
Mm-hmm.
Because one is like you are finding the divinity through reduction, and that's the darkness. And then anything that has any type of ingestion is you're finding some type of divinity through addition. And there's just a distinct, delicious, somatic difference between what the withdrawing or the reduction into the mysterium as opposed to the addition.
Interesting.
And what I learned in the darkness retreat is that the medicine is to not do your spiritual checklist, to just not do any mental technique, to not meditate, and just to just to weep. And it's because it's 100% true for me, but my intuition about most of us is that, first off, most people just don't know how to even allow themselves to cry, even if they're looking at like their parent dying. You know, like the average Westerner is sufficiently stunted from just expressing tears at all. But I think each of us are walking around in our soma with just like unprocessed tragedies of being alive in a modernity that's dying. You know, like I think one of the big things that, you know, everyone that we know like pays lip service to it, but I don't think many people have really somatically processed the fact that like our childhood world is dead forever. Like the reality and the possible realities that could have been if there wasn't this invention of these phones and these computers and this raging internet and these algorithms, like everyone listening who is older than like 25 has a sense of that like beatific, almost virginal Eden, like not yet corrupted by, you know, the worst parts of the internet. And I think we're living through like a historic change in worldviews that, you know, historians will look back on in 200 years if we don't extinct ourselves as like, you know, like 2010 to 2030 was like one of the most important times in humanity's history. That's my current. And I just don't think we've processed it, you know? And it's like most people who care have seen war, crime, trauma on their phone, have seen more human bodies destroyed by bombs and bullets than any soldier from any army, you know? Like, anyone who was tracking the two recent wars and, you know, got into a loop on their phone, just traumas in their soma. And what I find is that with the darkness retreat and with the vision quest is that when we remove any option for distraction, the first thing that comes up is your spiritual defenses of like, you know, the mantras and the yogic postures and the whatever. But then once you exhaust that or simply just don't do it, the natural healing that happens is just weeping. It's just like, yo, what haven't you cried about in your life? You know? And so for me, a lot of the weeping was contentless, but when it did have content, it's like, there is a part of me that knows that I'm not appreciating the golden age of my relationship with my partner because I'm constantly thinking about what do I have to do so that we can have the security so that she can, you know, have a child. And just like weeping for like, man, we are living through a point in our life for 20 years from now where we're going to look back and be like, damn, those were the fucking golden days. You know, like just being
so true, man.
In our kitchen, grinding and trying to make this fucking podcast set up where 99.99% of the people on the planet don't know who we are. And we have these dreams and, you know, and it's like, we're going to look back in 20 years and be like,
absolutely, man.
Damn, that was so good.
And anytime like there's a threshold approaching, you know, a family death, like I have a 19-year-old cat with cancer, you know, like all of these things that start to like initiate that reflective process of realizing a time that's about to end that you can never get back, that you can never revisit. And unless that's, part of me suspects that could be some feature of the afterlife, that you have this like non-temporal access to
that's interesting.
Your timeline or something for a little bit.
That's interesting.
But sidebar, if you think that thought experiment out, it would feel like, you know, you can play a new game plus in an RPG.
For sure, yeah.
It's cool at first because you're like, oh, I can do whatever I want. I'm not bound by the rules. But then you get sick of it. It's like, well, it's the same game though.
Yeah.
It's like, I could go back and do this. But again, in what would probably feel like a durationless time where there's no pressure to do anything on any schedule, I think there's a strong chance that would lead right back to the kind of mental conglomeration that puts you in a body again, where you're just desiring the new, the novel, the whatever. But anyway,
that's so interesting.
I don't want to interrupt here.
Yeah. So day one, it's like 6 p.m. I've already cried so much that I'm starting to worry about the amount of snot coming out of my nose because there's a part of my mind that's like, we got to keep the moisture in, you know, because this is going to be fucking nuts. This is going to be the most intense thing I've ever done. So it's surprisingly hot when we're doing this. It's like October 28th or October 20th-ish in that range. And it was, you know, Texas doesn't give a fuck. And so it got up to, it was like 90 degrees on that first day. And I was like, this is going to be tough. But it was like 6 p.m. The sun had already crest the like tree line. And so I got out my sleeping bag and proceeded to not be able to fall asleep for probably 6 hours because it was just so hot. And, you know, I'm so used to my human comforts and I've got a fucking sleep 8 where, you know, I can set the temperature or 8 sleep. And I have my fucking AC, and I like that first night was probably the worst night of sleep that I can remember having ever.
Yeah.
And there's a thing called hypnagogic jerks where where it happens to me the most was when I was in high school. If I was falling asleep in a class, that a part of my brain knew it wasn't safe to sleep. As soon as I'd start to fall asleep, I would jerk so hard. Sometimes I'd almost knock my desk over.
Yeah.
So that type of thing happened for like 5 hours. Like I would slowly start to fall asleep and then, you know, I would have some intense jerk and I got to the point where I was almost like crying, begging my body like, yo, we are safe. You can sleep. Please, please just let us sleep. And I don't know how, but at some point I did fall asleep and I had 2 flickers of 2 dreams. And this was the only time, the entire time that I had any dreams.
Wow.
My first dream was I was in a living room and I was looking on a like end table and there was strawberry Haagen-Dazs. And it was just melted enough where you know the first bite is going to be like the just right ratio of like still cold, but then has like the wetness around it. And then I woke up and I was like, body, you son of a bitch. We came here for visions and you're showing me Haagen-Dazs. And then I had like what felt like a true vision where I saw this like pink, almost like opal background that was kind of like pulsing. And then in the foreground, in the middle, was a hummingbird that was almost like, it was like frozen in time. It was like a piece of art almost, but it was alive in the dream space, and its wings were splayed out and its head was up and to the left. and its plumage was like shimmering like green blue,
Mm-hmm.
and then the pulsing pink opal behind it, and it was just this kind of like kairotic, frozen in time, like mythic symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And I woke up and I was just like, wow, that was cool. But no content around it, because what I woke up into was, oh my God, I'm in the woods and I have to be
Right.
here for 3 more full days and I don't have water and I'm afraid. And the next morning comes around for like an hour. It's just cool enough that existence is enjoyable, because this whole time I'm in just boxers because it's so hot, And for about like an hour in the morning, it's nice. And I'm like, I can do this. This is fucking awesome. And within like 3 hours, the sun had already caressed the like hill coverage. And then I realized that the spot that my dear mentor picked for me had no sun cover. And so for the next like 8 hours, it is just Apollo ruining me. Like, I'm basically covering myself with like a tarp or something, just dumping sweat just for like 8 hours. And what I do on that first day is I repeated a mantra to myself, like the whole time, just to like brute force my cognition. And so my mantra was Om Mane Padme Om.
Mm-hmm.
And I just repeated that. And I got into some really like locked in meditative state. But there wasn't a lot of content that day. I did take my one and only poop that day. And we had like, like a little poop hole that you could just like walk outside of your thing, drop a deuce. But that whole first day was really just trying to grit it out. And
not the poop, but the
right. The poop came easy, it was the sun. And by the end of that first day, I am the most sunburnt I've ever remembered being, because at some point I like fell asleep, because it was like 2 p.m. or something. And when I was going to bed that night, I was like, I don't think I'm going to be able to do this. Like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. It's not even close. Like, no distractions. There's nothing else to do. And it's like 90 degrees and I'm dumping sweat and I don't have any motherfucking cloud or any sun coverage. So day 3 comes around. Really crazy shit happens at night, but I definitely heard large animals come close to me, but I'm pretty sure it was like a really large buck. Like the way it's like the crunch of its foot. And it's really hard to tell what's happening out there because I'm already 2 days without food or water. And, I don't know how fucked up my consciousness is.
Yeah, and when it's in the middle of the night, too, you're in this semi-altered state of consciousness, too. Like nighttime is just so weird. Like the idea that the veil is thinned to the underworld at night is just so true in my experience. The like repressed fears come to the surface, things you're worried about that you don't want to think about during the day, right to the front of your mind, or you start like literally dreaming about them. And then that mixed with how the mind would be addled by no water, no food, in the middle of the night, tired but not sleeping. It's just, I can imagine that it'd be really hard to know what the hell's going on.
Yeah, and one thing I forgot to add is by the end of that first full day, so it was technically day 2, when the sun finally broke the horizon in the evening and like started to crest below the ridge of the trees, each day that happened, it was like I would just weep from like relief. Like, oh my God, we made it, we did it. And so on that first day when the sun passed, I'm laying on my back and I'm just like, oh my God, I don't know if I can do this. And speaking to like the altered state of consciousness, it's hard to tell how high you are until you have to interact with someone who's not high, and then it really crystallizes just how fucking high you are. In hindsight, I can see how altered my consciousness was, but when I was in it, it was just this like slow creep of altered consciousness because of the no water. I think but so in hindsight, it was it was noticeable to me that at the end of that first full day, as I'm laying on my back, it's like there's no reservation in believing the spontaneous intuition of what an animal is trying to say to you through its behavior. It's just like instantaneous, oh, this animal is saying this to me.
Right. Interesting.
And so at the end of that first day, I'm like, I don't know how I'm going to do this. I'm looking up and I see this Mariposa, a butterfly, like land on a branch like right above my head and then start to like dance around in circles and then land and then dance around and circle. And it wasn't there the whole day. And the instantaneous feeling was that she was like clapping, like, yay, you did it. Good job. And like, as soon as I like let that energy into my body, in the same field of sight, like 100 yards in the air, there is a falcon or a hawk. And it does almost the exact same movement that the butterfly did, but like 100 yards in the sky. And the felt sense of that energy was just like, I see you. And again, in hindsight, it's like I 100% was already to the point where animals communicate and this is what they say. Like no skepticism.
Yeah.
And no like gaslighting, like, am I just making this up? No, like my prefrontal cortex by the end of day 2 was already dehydrated to the point where it wasn't functioning. So I'm able to sleep that night. I have some weird animal encounters. Day 3 comes around and I want to give up. Like as soon as it feels like from the moment the sun comes up until it gets where it's above the ridge, it's just like, yo, it's only been like 20 minutes. Like it feels like it's so fast. And then as soon as it breaks the ridge and I don't have any cover, it's just like it gets to the, like noon point and then it just feels like it fucking stays there. Like a fucking savage dom that won't ever let you go and just like is not. And it's just like, how are you there for 5 hours where it just feels.
Yeah.
But anyways. That day 3, there was no more Om Mani Padme Om. It was crying. I can't do this. And then I eventually got to like a spontaneous mantra came up that was thousands of others have done this with less. And that like locked something in where it's like, I am so fucking privileged. I still have a sleeping bag. I still have like, I got to drink 100 and something ounces of water. I got to eat a fucking steak. Like there are so many people like in the Lakota lineage, there are people who die doing this because they trust it that much. And it's like, I can fucking do this. Like I can do this. And I probably repeated that mantra like 2,000 times that day. And intermittently, I was praying and just like deeply praying with everything I could, like, bring me a cloud. Please just bring me a fucking cloud. And I definitely had a moment that third day around like probably what was 2 p.m., like from tracking where the sun is in the sky, where I basically did a little ritual where I imagined myself giving up. I like deeply imagine myself like leaving and walking back and, and it's kind of hard to articulate, but what it felt like I was doing in the moment is that I was performing a type of magic where I was creating a timeline that got the reprieve that could like feed me. And I don't know if it worked, but it felt more real than imagination at that point, but I was definitely basically insane. By this point on, it's just insanity. I eventually get through that third day. No insights, just brutality. Just like, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. And then thousands of people have done this with less. And then when the sun breaks and goes and crests beneath the tree line, I again roll back. The butterfly is back. Wasn't there all day. And it's back almost like clockwork. And like, I'm starting to cry from the synchronicity of just like, this is too on the nose to not get, like I can't gaslight myself. And so as I'm appreciating her and she's doing her thing, another one comes and now there's fucking two. And there was just something about it like, oh my God, they're helping me. They want, it's this instantaneous, like, duh, that's what was happening. And then I swear to God, 100 yards above it, 2 hawks this time. Just like, and again, like in hindsight, it feels like, oh no, this is too mythopoetic. This can't be real.
Yeah.
But I was so gone that when it was happening, it was just like, this is reality. Like, this is what was always meant to be in this moment. Everything is as it should be, blah, blah, blah. And it was just incredibly beautiful and incredible. I also had a moment on the third day where I got to hear a hawk go from full flight to landing on a tree branch. And there's this flicker that they do with their wings to stop their momentum so they can drop onto a branch. And it was a sound I had not ever heard before, like in person. It was like a vibration I had never experienced in person in my entire life. And then when it hit me, it felt like it activated like a genetic memory. And what it conveyed was like this instantaneous, immense respect for like, this is a mentor. And the way it landed in me was like, oh, this is just the relationship between hawk and humans for eons. It was something about the sound of the flick, like the flicking flutter of the wing so that it was such a cool sound. And it was like a profound experience on that third day. I think the most interesting thing that happened was that third night. So that third night, have you ever heard a pack of coyotes get into a killing frenzy? Like,
I'm not sure.
So I hadn't before this, like I definitely have heard a pack of coyotes like yip and howl.
Right.
But there's a different intensity when they're actively making a kill. And they made a kill like 150 yards from my campsite when I was sleeping, or it was at night. And I could hear it. And this was also something that in hindsight, it was like, it's really weird that it didn't make me nervous at all. And it was probably like 10, 15 coyotes. Like that's what it sounded like. But when they were killing whatever they were killing, what I felt in my body was a complete integration with the physical environment at this point, because I felt something in me be replenished at the felt sense of not having to try anymore. So it was like a part of me felt like the animal that was being killed. And I could feel like a physiological relief from the felt sense of, wow, I don't have to try anymore. And then at the same time, I felt a physiological nourishment from the killing.
Wow.
Again, in hindsight, from this state of consciousness, it's like, no, you didn't. You're just making that shit up. But then from inside the experience, like 3 days after being in the same plot of land, no distractions, no food, no water, I can now see that like my Erick identity wasn't operating. One, because I was so dehydrated, but two, there's nothing in this piece of wild nature that would even ping back to me Erickness. And so it's like my identity had kind of like melted out of the container of my identity of Erick, and it just like splooshed across the landscape of where I was staying. And so when this kill happened, like I felt significant physiological relief and nourishment from this killing. When I woke up on the 4th day, I could see the area where the killing had happened, and there were like 8 vultures, and so like that reinforced to me that it wasn't just like a waking dream, because I barely slept this whole time because it's so uncomfortable and you're fasting and it's hot. And then on the start of the 4th day, I had definitely lost my fucking mind because there were clouds. And I was 100% like, I was the cloud caller. My prayers on the
Yeah.
previous day called these clouds, and I'm like, I'm going to do it. I'm going to be able to make it.
I would
And
have thought that too, 100%.
so I was even singing a song to the clouds, and it was something like, I wish I could remember it. It was something like, it was something along the lines of, please stay from dawn till dusk, and it was just like, hold out. And then like noon comes around and the clouds are gone and it's just 90 degrees again and it's hot. And by this point on this last day, once the clouds were gone, I kind of like lost my mind and I took all of my material, like my sleeping bag and the bag that had my like clothing in it and all my clothes, and I threw it on this tree, a tree that wasn't blocking the sun. But I thought if I could get enough shit in this tree, I could make some shade. And so I threw everything I had on this fucking tree. And I guess because of the geometry of the sun, it still only produced like, maybe like a 1.5 foot by 1 foot rectangle. And I was like, how does that much debris in the tree create only this much shade? But then I basically like got in that box and tried to fit my whole body in that box. And I'm just waiting. And like every couple of minutes, I have to slowly scooch, because the sun's moving. And I finally get to this point where like, the entire vision quest felt like a continuous, slow, like blossoming of kairos, as opposed to ordinary consciousness. But then on this last day, it's like there was like a lightning strike moment where the slow, gradual, kairotic embrace 10x'd, and I was in this like timeless, godless, godful place. It was like everything changed. And I'm looking at this tree and I realize that the shape of my debris that I threw in the tree is a cross. And I have this instantaneous like insight of like your task is to learn how to meditate in the shade of your crucifixion. Instantaneous knowing this was the lesson that I was supposed to get from this experience. For me personally, my cosmology, my worldview is a unique synthesis of East and West, where what I see the West has gotten right that I think most people's attempt to practice or interpret Buddhism misses is the opera, Goethe, William Shakespeare, Mozart, Picasso. Like, there is something about the Western psyche that produces incredible drama. That there's something about the symbol of the crucified God, and that being a symbol for reality that like makes music that makes you weep. And there's a part of me that's like, fuck you, I'm not giving that up. Like I will bear the burden of caring, of having an identity, and I don't think it's wrong because it produces this art. But then at the same time, what I see for me personally that Buddhism gets so right is it's like, just because the ego is crucified, there's something else happening that's not crucified, that we all have access to, that is profoundly, it's just fundamentally true and loving and calm and gorgeous in its perfection. And it's always here. And like the whole idea of original sin and of your guilt, it's like, it's not just not religiously true. It's not phenomenologically the case. And you can learn how to see the truth of that. And so I was like, wow, that's cool, but like in my experience, Yeah, it's hard to explain, but it feels like there is a mythopoetic snapshot that is almost like a Harry Potter portrait that's like moving. You know how they like, they take a picture of someone and it continues to
Oh
move
yeah, I think I know
like
what you're
it's
talking
alive.
about. Yeah.
It's like I now have that portrait in the like museum of my psyche that I can just go to, look at it, and feel the truth of that moment as kind of like a anchor or a pillar. And so as I'm contemplating this, my right arm starts to go numb. And this is the last day. I have probably like 6 hours left until it's no, I probably have 4 hours left until the sun will break the horizon, and I just got to make it like 4 more hours. My right arm starts to go numb, and I'm like, that's interesting. Like, no panic, no worry, but it's also because I'm basically brain dead, from not having
Yeah.
any absolute functioning. And so for like half an hour, because I'm laying on my back and my arms are splayed, I'm like, I'll see what happens if I don't lay down anymore. And I sit up and my right arm stays numb. And after about like 10 minutes, my left arm starts to go numb. And in my head, I'm like, that's weird. I've never in my life have had both of my arms be numb, especially if I'm not like pinned on them from like sleeping. And so I start looking at my arms, and I then have the thought of what would Caitlin say if she saw me right now, where she saw that my arms were numb and I wasn't even contemplating stopping. I was just like, wow, that's weird. And so the moment I thought of Caitlin, I started to laugh. And then I had this like instantaneous insight that, this is the choice moment of the initiation, because my intention was to call in the transformation of my individual young man ego identity and transition into like husband, father identity. I instantly kind of saw like the two choices. And choice one was to choose what the young man would choose, which is, for my reputation, even though I won't admit that to anyone else, I'm going to stay in here until I'm physically dragged out. And I know that, like, that's what I do, because I don't give up.
Right.
And and I didn't know it in the moment, but in hindsight, I looked it up, and the symptom that occurs before organ failure starts due to water exhaustion is your limbs start to go numb. So I was one symptom away from organ shutdown, but I didn't know it at the time. So my first option was what my individual male ego would choose to do.
Yeah.
And then the other choice was, okay, I choose to walk out now. I take the knock on my reputation of not being able to complete this thing, but it's the right choice so that I can be available tomorrow to be a husband and a father, like mythologically.
Right. Yeah.
And as soon as the choice kind of presented itself, I knew which one I wanted to choose. I chose option 2. I got up, I did like a prayer, and I left my square to go back to the sweat lodge, and I proceeded to get lost. And this was the only time. Now I'm afraid because my arms are numb. And I'm trying to get somewhere, and I'm lost, and I'm starting to really feel the effects of the dehydration because I haven't walked around for 4 days. I'm just laying there. I'm not exercising. Yeah. And so I'm starting to walk around on this land. It's like 120 acres, and I end up on the opposite side of the motherfucking land at what was going to be my first spot. And I see the dude's fucking outhouse, and I'm like, I am so turned around. And I was afraid to yell for help because I didn't want to fuck up his experience because it was the last day. And so I just start praying, and I finally find my way back after probably about like half an hour to 40 minutes of being lost, which was the scariest moment of the whole 4 days, because I felt like I was close to passing out my arms are like they're still numb.
Yeah.
And so I finally get to the sweat. The dude's not there. It's one guy is there and he's someone who's helping out. And I can tell he's kind of like shocked to see me. And I can only imagine what the fuck I looked like. But I went to speak, and I went to say, "Where's Ken?" And the sound that came out of my throat is a voice that, like, what I imagine a mummy would sound like if they attempted to speak, like just dust and no moisture. And the first thing the dude says is, "Congratulations, you're the last one." And in my head, my very first thought was, fuck you, don't lie to me. Because there were two other people who did this quest with me. One was a former UFC heavyweight contender, and the other one worked in special forces for the Rangers in the Army.
Yeah.
And there was something about the smirk and also I hadn't looked at a human face in 4 days, and so I think I misread the like glimmer in his eye, but I really thought he was lying to me, and I got so fucking mad. Like inside, I didn't express that to him, but like rage. Where's Ken? I want my water. Like that's all I'm thinking about. He calls Ken. Ken doesn't answer, and I look at him like that is not an acceptable response to me right now. I need water, but I didn't say any of that. And so this dude just looks at me with wide eyes and just starts sprinting because he's going to sprint back to the house and find the dude. And, so for like 20 minutes, I have to sit down outside of this sweat lodge with four 4-gallon barrels of water, like the type that you put inside of like a big office cooler.
And all you're thinking about is just dumping it all over your body, probably.
If I'm remembering correctly, I was so enraged. I was so mad that I wasn't even fantasizing about relief. It was just like, I can't believe he's not here. I can't believe that they're not prepared. I can't believe. And it's really funny because like that's not an emotion I feel often, almost ever, like rage. So finally, Ken, the leader, makes it, and I see the other two people come with him who I thought were still out there. They had come in early. The UFC contender had came in after 24 hours. And then the Army Ranger specialist came in after 2 days. And so I was shocked at that. And so I was the one that lasted the longest when I thought that I had, that I was the only one who didn't make it. And in hindsight, Ken, the leader, was like, we probably shouldn't have done this at this time because it was just way too hot and everyone was way too dehydrated and blah, blah, blah. But we still have to do the sweat. I tell him my arms are numb. And his response is just kind of like like, I was like, whatever. So we go and we do the sweat, and he brings me a mountain valley after the first door is what they call it. And he brings me this ice cold mountain valley, and he puts it in my hand. And I really think I will remember this until the day I die. The experience of that first taste of water is better than any sex I've ever had. It was like nothing like it ever. And the moment I took the first gulp, it was this like laughter into weeping, back into laughter, into like almost moaning. And it was, I just kind of awesome. And there's like 6 other people in the sweat with me, and I can't even process them. It is just me laughing, weeping, moaning, laughing, weeping, moaning until I drink probably about half of it. And then I start to feel sick, because it was too much. And that was basically, and then I had my first bite of food, which was a watermelon, a thick sliced watermelon with a lime drizzled over it with some salt. And brothers, that was the best bite of food I've ever had in my entire life. Like it's so good remembering it, I want to punch the wall. Like that's how. And that was basically my experience.
Yeah, man. It's just you subject yourself to these things that I would never do. Not to that level, because it's just, on one hand, I get it, because you're experiencing life at a tantric depth of sacredness, right? Like you truly don't understand the value. It's so cliche to say, like, you don't understand the value of water till you don't have it. But it's true, right? It's incredibly true. And that experience that you described as the orgasmic water consumption
Man.
is one of those things that just reorients your value system and what you think is important in such a dramatic way that you just, even sitting here now as you can't fathom it. And
For
I
sure.
definitely can't fathom it. So I definitely, despite my being like, I don't think I need to put myself through that, like, I get it. And I respect the fuck out of it. And this is a great introduction for anybody that doesn't know you. This speaks exactly to what I was talking about at the beginning of this mind meld. Like, just saying that you do these things, you put yourself out of your comfort zone, you take yourself out of this context and bring yourself into these, at times grueling, but ultimately very meaningful and transformative types of initiatory experiences that I think re-imbue life with the kind of wonder and sacredness that we're all missing.
Yeah.
But there's that thing in the human psyche that just does not want us to do it.
For
I mean,
sure.
as simple as just taking a break from the phone, or putting off eating a meal for a few hours, or whatever. There's just that thing inside of us that doesn't want to do it. And it's so much easier to acquiesce to that just convenience all the time, unless you specifically put something on the calendar and be like, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
And there's like, that's it. I'm buying the plane ticket. I'm doing the
Yeah.
whatever, and it's happening. And it doesn't need to be this extreme, obviously, but I really do think that one of the biggest medicines, transformational aspects of being a human being, is to do some kind of initiatory thing, something that transforms your psyche, something that brings you closer to gratitude, closer to reflection on your mortality. Because what ends up happening in this kind of comfort is you just kind of you sort of mentally check out in a weird way.
For sure.
It's like everything is so convenient that you just don't have to think about that stuff. And when you don't have to think about that stuff, it makes it seem not real, and then fucking collides with you. It just like T-bones you when it comes, and you're just not prepared. And you cling, and I say this as someone who knowing full well I'm very guilty of this.
We all are. Yeah.
But one thing that I think I really want to zoom in on is you talked about how going into this experience brought you right back into the darkness retreat. And in my experience, this is true as well, that there's this kind, whether we call it kairos or mythic time or initiatory time or whatever, it's that thing where we could say the daimon shows up, but that's a little obtuse, and I'd rather be more specific with what I mean by saying that. But it's something where it just feels like you're entering this kind of hyper reality that's outside of the consensus reality bubble, where it's just you and your own psyche. And, it was like that. I really liked Monroe for that reason, because it was a great balance of going into that space and going into that space often and fairly intensely, but very comfortable. Like I could take the headphones off anytime. I know there's a good meal, like a couple hours down the road.
Yeah.
But it's something where it's just you and yourself, and you just keep deepening into that relationship with you and yourself until something else kind of cracks open.
100%.
And you realize there's this whole other world. There's this inner journeying. There's this inner cosmos telescope that just keeps unfolding to a point where it's deeply you and your own thoughts and your own shit, but then it's also like somehow breaks into everything else at a certain point. And that's easier to confront if you're taking like a psychedelic or something, but it can also absolutely come into view on the natch using just meditation, just isolation, just discomfort.
For sure.
But usually for me, if I'm doing anything that's remotely grueling, I have all these big ideas about what it's going to be, and that it's going to lead to some kind of an epiphany.
For sure.
And then it's just being grateful, like
100%.
deeply grateful for, I did like close to the time that I went full time with this. I did that. Do you remember me telling you about the 12-hour walk thing?
Yeah.
That was an example where I'm like, this can't be that hard. I'm going to do a 12-hour walk.
That's awesome.
But then by the end of it, you're just like, I mean, it's a combination of the shoes I was wearing and the clothes and the things you never think about, like the friction of your arm rubbing against the side of your body thousands and thousands and thousands of times. Like, oh, it's a little uncomfortable. And it's a little more uncomfortable.
Interesting.
That's a little more uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that's a little more uncomfortable. And then by the end of it, every step hurts. And you're like, I could just call an Uber right now. I could just do this. I could just do that. And then there's that same thing that kicks on inside of you. You're like, I said I was doing a 12-hour walk. I'm doing a 12-hour walk. And by the end of it, you're just so, crumpled. But in the defeat of yourself, there's something that also gets replenished weirdly.
For sure.
And that's an interesting thing to reflect on. Like, what is that thing that in really smashing your ego down, and it's even in the way that I'm saying this isn't coming out right, because it sounds like there's another kind of value to yourself that you have underneath your ego. That's not what I'm saying. It's like something else that's not you in a weird way, or that's like beyond you, that makes you grateful for yourself and for your ego weirdly by having it so dismantled.
Yeah, so there's a few things here. One is people who think they're one person are the least mentally aware. Like, we're a conglomeration or a constellation or an ecosystem of parts. And a really popular metaphor in psychology in the last 10 years is the elephant and the rider. And the idea is that the part of your brain that does language, and for most people who are right-handed, that's the left hemisphere, that is the part of the brain that myth makes, that linguistalizes your sense of an identity.
Yeah.
But that part of the brain's control over your behavior is akin to an amateur rider of an elephant trying to direct an elephant. And like the rest of the architecture of your brain represents the drives of this elephant, and that the linguistic part, the part that is telling all the stories, that has all of your memories and your beliefs about who you are, that thing gets to fool itself when the elephant is not triggered, because the elephant will basically go where the rider tries to direct the elephant to go. But as soon as the elephant sees anything it likes or sees anything it's afraid of, it runs the motherfucking show, and the rider confabulates is the technical term for it. It's called bullshitting yourself.
Yeah.
Where you just bullshit yourself trying to make meaning of the fact that you're doing behaviors that you didn't choose to do. And so most of us are doing that most of the time. And I think when we do these other type of experiences where you're articulating that there's this felt sense of it's just you and your psyche, I think that's akin to when the rider gets off of the elephant and really starts to just look at the elephant with a curious attempt to understand. And I also think the reason that feels like it's a different mythopoetic time is because, and this is where I'm going to get kind of irresponsible with my suggesting, I recently, in the last couple of years, I've changed my mind on reincarnation. I think we reincarnate. 2, I think some part of our attentional system knows what it feels like to die. And I think that felt sense of kairos that we get when it's just us and our psyche is because that is the psychic configuration that makes up the vehicle that we move in when we die. Like, you can imagine it's a room that only clicks into place like Legos when the ego stops trying to ride the psyche.
Yeah.
And gets off of its, high seat and actually starts to look at the elephant, quote unquote, and that the eye contact kind of like creates the spaceship where it's like, oh, we're back in the room.
Yeah.
This is the room we take when we're going to die.
Well, this is interesting because like, have we talked about the soul vehicle and stuff like that?
I think we have a bit.
It kind of sounds like what you're saying kind of reminds me of the soul vehicle, but it also just clicks in really nicely with a number of different things that have kind of to do with subtle bodies and potentially the out-of-body state. And if you think about, well, what does it mean to be out of your physical body? And I can say from experience, it is like something. Like, it feels like something. It's not just like mentally journeying. It feels like I've become this watery, electrified, still weirdly kind of human-shaped configuration of energy, and my mind is still attached to this thing, and I still feel like myself. That, I'm not saying that's what it's like when you die, because there may be varying levels of
I don't know.
dissociations.
Yeah.
And I suspect that it's probably something like the koshas, like the Hindu Eastern subtle bodies. Like, you have this, you have basically a few different shells. You have from the causal shell that's even before your mind down to the gross physical shell. And then the three shells in between that are basically what makes up your collective subtle body. And then there's a term for each one of those. And then there's a term collectively for those three things. Like, there's the mental body, there's the blah, blah, blah. I can't remember what they all are. But anyway, I suspect that when your physical body dies, there's something immediately familiar that occurs, because you're like, oh, I've been that the whole time. Like, I've actually still been this the whole time. I've just felt less like this, because it's, again, one of the only things I think we can do in these situations is to shift it to a dimension that makes sense here.
For sure.
So it'd be sort of like if you close your eyes right now, it would still feel familiar. It's not like you're like, what the hell is this? Oh my God. It's
That's
like,
a good
oh yeah,
point.
my eyes are just closed. I feel like it's probably going to be something like that. There's going to be something that breaks free. Your awareness will still be there, but I also think all of your mental bullshit will still be there. And this is sort of what the Tibetan Book of the Dead says. This is what Robert Monroe says that quote unquote locale 2 is like. He would talk about when you get out of your body and you get free of like this realm and you go into what he called locale 2. This is the realm of where he does think you go and you die, at least for a while, but it's a realm that's purely mental. So if you have desires, you're going to those desires. If you're horny, you're going to that. If you're hungry, you're going to that. You can't get rid of like whatever that is. So you have to figure out how to navigate those desires, or you have to purge yourself of those desires before you go into this kind of a state.
How would you compare that to the lucid dreaming state?
That's a good question. I think they're probably related. And in my experience, I highly suspect that what led to me going out of body was precipitated by a lucid dream. But I don't know for sure. And it gets very funky. We talked about this before, because it gets funky because you and I come from a more Jungian perspective on dreams, where it's not something that's literally happening in a non-physical realm. It's something the psyche is doing for a compensatory reason, or that's the function of dreaming in general, right? There's something coming from the unconscious, and then the invitation is you have the conscious mind meet the unconscious mind and form this synthesis where you can bring back some insight, right? But Robert Monroe was very comfortable saying, no, you're going out of your body. Like, you're at night.
Into space-time, and you can like see things in space-time.
Well, there's that, but then there's also like when you're having, I don't think he would say every single dream is literally you going out of body, because he's more intellectually sophisticated than that. But he was saying like, yeah, when you go at night, when you're hitting REM and you're going at there's part of you that leaves the body. And that's why your body is completely paralyzed, because it's not just the neurochemistry and like cutting off your physical nervous system. It actually really is, there's part of you that is journeying in a non-physical sense.
Wow.
So that's another way, but then it's like trying to square that with the Jungian view gets tricky, because there's a lot of projection that can occur when you're saying, oh yeah, you're literally leaving your body and you're doing this and you're doing that. You can.
I haven't met anyone who abuses that,
Right. No one. Yeah. It's not common at all. So yeah, I think it's definitely epistemically tricky territory, but what I do want to focus more in on is I feel like there's this collective, and maybe this is and I'm left-handed, so maybe it's left brain for me or right brain. I'm not sure. Whatever the storytelling side of my brain wants to do, where I want to, like, part of me wants to unify all of these non-ordinary experiences into something, or progress of something, or the unfolding or flowering of something. And I've done more than average by a lot. You've done way more than me.
What do you mean? On what?
In terms of like entering, doing things where I'm going to go do this for a week. I'm going to go do that for a week. I'm going to take a heroic dose of this or that. But you've done that a lot more than I have. So you've done this more than, I mean, you know some truly insane people. So you probably know people who do it even more than you. But you're in the top 1% for sure, I think, of like people who alter their consciousness, put themselves in uncomfortable situations. Do you feel like there's a collective thing occurring or new kinds of knowing, or do you think you have to appeal to the sort of psychotechnology of story craft to make that make sense? Or do you think that there really is something that's happening there?
Could you give an example of what answering yes would mean to you? Like, what's an example of something continually or continuously happening?
Well, so you were given the dichotomy between the Eastern and Western, at least in the way that we popularly view it here, right? And I think you could broadly say the Western path is the path of like personal becoming and apotheosis, right? Like you are unfolding into not only the best version of yourself, but in an esoteric sense, most Western esoteric schools, even Jung, are saying like you give birth to something else upon death. But you have to go through that laboring process in your life. And for him, he was fond of the alchemical metaphor, which is one of the best ones, right?
Yeah,
like you're doing psychological alchemy, and either you die achieving that, having accomplished something, or you just don't. And that's the whole part of the Philemon's rap in the Red Book, right? You either dissolve into the pleroma, back into the wholeness, or you become something like what he called a star, right? Like you gain,
so cool.
and there's actually a Greek word for this too, which is like ogoetes soma, which is like luminous body. So there's this idea that and this is in Plato's Timaeus too, that there's this, for each soul, there's a corresponding star.
Yep.
So there's something like that you could be, maybe you're waking up to that over the course of your life, or you're solidifying that, or so there's that. There's the daimonic part of it too. Like, are you, is this all kind of in an effort to commune with that personal daimon? And these things kind of go together, so it's not one or the other. Or is it, the more Eastern way of viewing it, where you're going beyond your ego and you're able to progress on what we would, at least in a cliche way, understand the goal of Buddhism to be, where you're like nullifying the ego, you're becoming more at peace with your mortality, and that, for the sake of itself, is the goal.
So I feel like there is a cumulative project occurring, and I would say that the cumulative project is one way to say it is I'm growing my capacity for sustained attention and for more subtle awareness. And that you could say that that's a very like Eastern thing, but it actually, for me, it perfectly fits with the Western goal as well, because
for sure,
like I think the task of our time is to like redream and reimagine what is a birthright, which is to have sustained attention. Like, I think we're in like a horror movie, like Memento, almost, where it's like almost no one notices that their attentional system has been murdered.
Yeah.
And that 20 years ago, before the phone, their attentional system was way different than it is now for the average person. And that the average person checks their phone every fucking 4.9 minutes. And that it takes about 20 minutes for a brain to drop into a complex task.
Yeah.
So the average person in the Western world is perpetually distracted. And the horror of it is the capacity of consciousness that would recognize that is the thing that's injured.
Right.
And so like that's the horror story.
Yeah.
And so like a part of why I do hard shit is because I have had moments of lucidity that were significant enough where I know what it tastes like to like have my head above water. You know, like for anyone here, if you grew up on Walmart food like I did, the month where you, for the first time in your life, ate healthy and you felt what it felt like in your body and you're like, oh my God, this is possible. It changes forever your relationship to junk food, like forever. And like, have you ever gotten into David or Gary? It's David Allen's Getting Things Done system.
I think I might have that book. What book is he known for again?
It's called Getting Things Done.
Yes. I think actually my old job might have given us that book during training.
That's incredible.
So I immediately like threw it at the wall
no,
and was like, I'm never reading this shit.
And I totally get it.
Yeah.
It's hard to install, but once you install it and it clicks and you can feel that your mind fundamentally changes its orientation to incoming tasks.
Mm-hmm.
It's also like food, where if you eat healthy for the first time, as soon as you teach your mind to not keep track of your to-do list and you actually train it to offload that to a computer or to a notebook, there's like a life before that moment and there's a life after that moment. For me, in my early 20s, you know, I broke my mind with the amount of psychedelics I was doing and because I didn't know better. But when I put my mind back together, before I got new friends, before I got a job, and I was just like, there was a level of clarity that I now know is possible when I don't have the luxury of almost any comfort. You know, like I was staying in my mom's house. We had almost no furniture. I didn't have a job and I was eating, you know, steamed vegetables and rice multiple days a week. And then I'd splurge on Chipotle. But like the clarity of my mind was, I've tasted what it feels like to be awake, even if it's just for like, you know, a day. And so part of the reason why I do this as much as I do is, I know what it feels like to be barely awake. And that's me most of the time. And like, I'm okay being able to admit that to myself, but I do think it casts kind of a harsh light on the people close to me, you know, because the people close to me hear me saying like, yo, I'm barely here.
Yeah.
You know, like what does that reflect to the people around me? And so the cumulative project is what I've noticed is my capacity to, it's like my inner flashlight is continuously growing, where I'm able to notice my parts more. I'm able to see when I bullshit myself more. I'm able to more finely tune the vibration of like the whisper to listen to as opposed to the whisper to ignore. And the sustained attention part is the vehicle to get more out of the psychedelic experience, you know? So like my slow accumulation of my capacity to not get lost in thought allows me to ride the craziness of experiences like this, without like spiraling out into some grandiosity or collapsing into some despair. That tends to be like the two great, how do you pronounce the two names in Greek mythology of like the sharp rock and the monster in the ocean? You know, it's basically like the rock in the hard place, but like smart people are able to say the Latin. I don't know how to say it. But anyways, it's like the two great protectors of the ego and the psychedelic experience when it comes up against something that it doesn't want to contend with is to either fly off into grandiosity. I am Jesus Christ, and that woman over there who I don't know, I'm supposed to marry her. Like,
yeah.
If you could track your subjective experience of what was happening in the ayahuasca, for example, you tripped over something that hurt, and then you flew off into Icarus land.
Yeah, archetypal possession.
Yes. And then the other great protection is to collapse into despair, where it's like, oh my God, I'm broken. I will never be fixed. Blah, blah, yeah, and we just like cave in. And these are the two great protectors.
I'm actually a lot closer to the latter. Like people might think that I'm having all these kinds of experiences where I'm thinking that I don't know, I have some grandiose thing. And part of me does feel like I want to accomplish something, of course. And I have these some outlandish goals and some outlandish ideas that you and I have talked about.
Yeah.
But honestly, the phenomenology of my experience during psychedelics is the very first thing that always happens to me is I get badly destroyed and badly what I feel like is a badly reprimanded for how just asleep I've been and how much I've been neglecting what I should be doing and the types and how much I'm taking things for granted and all of that kind of stuff. But yeah, that's a great insight that I think that people do fly in one direction or the other into some kind of archetypal possession, like mana personality, Jung thing, or completely, I'm worthless, I'm unhealable, I'm disgusting. And they just kind of wither into that or ascend into the, like you said, Icarus land. I think that's true.
Yeah. And so like for me, the reason I do what I do is, like, because I have a somatic taste for what like it really feels like to be awake and to be compassionate and to not be inflated, but to be inspired. It's like I know what it feels like to have clean teeth. And to just be in modernity and to answer emails and to do what I need to do to make money so that I can basically not have to listen to someone who doesn't care about me tell me that I have to be somewhere for a time for a meeting when I have a kid. Like that's my big, I'm working hard so no one can tell me that I have to be somewhere else instead of with my kid. Like that's my thing. But I can feel that my soul accumulates like comfort gunk. Like, I can feel that only after a couple of days, I am starting to forget the truth that we are living through a schizophrenic renaissance, that people are being, like it's really trying to weigh like the profound tragedies happening right now as we speak on this planet. And the fact that I dare to believe that I can do anything to improve life on this planet, even 1%, which I do have the audacity to believe. And so because I choose to have that audacity, I have to clean my teeth every couple of months. It's just like you go to the motherfucking dentist to get your teeth cleaned. How did I say that? Your teeth cleaned? Hell yeah.
I actually didn't even notice it.
To get your teeth cleaned, I will do a hard consciousness shifting experience roughly once a quarter. And if my life demands or, synchronicity invites me, I'll do it more frequently than that. But it's about once a quarter. And I frankly think for most people in modern life, especially if they don't have a proclivity for psychedelics, the darkness retreat and the visionary quest, because they're both mysterium by way of reductio, like I'm trying to make up Latin as I'm talking, but
I know what you're saying. Yeah.
That there's something uniquely healing and potent for the Western mind, especially, this eye-rolling new wave of people going from spirituality back to Christianity and pretending like they're not running back into dogma to protect themselves from how hard it is to contend with how overwhelming the world is. That for those people, the 4 days without food or water and a few days in darkness, I think it can start to help them clean their soul a bit, so they don't become calcified, ossified, dogmatic, spiritual, abandoners.
Right. What I love about this conversation is I think a lot of times people conflate spirituality with having some kind of super transcendent experience where you're communing with beings and you feel, the sort of cliche 5D, really fantasy oriented kind of spirituality.
Anime. It's like a bad graphic novel.
Yeah. But that said, now that we've been responsible for roughly the last hour and a half, and you already brought up how your ontology has sort of changed to a point where you're like, yeah, I think we reincarnate.
Yeah.
How has your view of the other world, other consciousnesses, the psyche's place in the sort of mental world, how has that changed? Like, you and I have had a lot of esoteric conversations over the years. You've always been into this stuff to varying degrees. Like, we've both been into Western esotericism. We both had we've had pretty deep dives into people like Robert Anton Wilson. We've riffed on some Crowley. We've, looked into the lodge magic tradition a little bit without ever going super deep. But we've also, done pretty significant amounts of research and thought and attempted work with like the personal daimon, for instance.
Sure.
All of that, how has all of that going into your calculus and these experiences, how has that transformed your idea about what is beyond the individual and what is beyond the individual psyche?
Man, I definitely have been to places, air quote, in non-ordinary states of consciousness where I have glimpsed, let's just call it, I've never tried to articulate this before, so bear with me.
Yeah.
It's like, how in the first Men in Black, the very end of the movie, when it like zooms out from Earth and the galaxy, and then it becomes the marbles of aliens on some other planet?
Yeah.
Okay, so that type of frame jumping out of to then making what used to be the frame now the context or the object of the picture, and then you zoom out again and now you see a frame and a picture and a frame and a picture, like that process. Language is bound in temporality.
Yep.
Story is bound by the one arrow of, the movement of time, and therefore all of our answers that aren't explicitly poetic are time-bound and have a time bias. I think when I'm in a particularly, let's just say when I'm really high, the structure of reality as it reveals itself to me does not conform to story, does not conform to linearity, does not conform. Not only does it not conform, it shatters and destroys the hope and the will of the part of me that lives inside of story. Because it's like, whatever the thing is, it's so beyond an answer to that question.
Right.
That simply grokking it shatters the questioner, like the one who asks the question, what happens after we die, or where's this going? It's just like,
right.
But when I think into the shape of this thing, what it feels like its teleology is, or like its function is for consciousness to move through it in almost like a toroidal movement.
Interesting.
And so when we think of how atoms are able to come together in a certain way that then produces, eventually me talking. Consciousness is moving up through these layers of this being, of these contexts, of these frames. Like one frame's the atom, one frame's a molecule, one frame's tissue, one frame's an organ, one frame is an organ system, and then one frame is the human talking. But then the frame above that would be like your friend group or your family. And then the frame above that is a coherent community. And then the frame group above that is a country that is in coordination with each other until it eventually gets to a planet waking up. Like, I think we are neuronal nodes on the body of a schizophrenic planet, but that we can come together like stem cells in a way where maybe one day Gaia Sophia has a functional enough nervous system where she can say a word. She can't speak yet because we're like a person whose nervous system isn't coordinated at all. And, it's basically like schizophrenic, but even in its movements, it can't even talk yet. But then I think the frame above that is something like the solar system becomes coherent enough where the stem cells on Gaia get onto all of the other planets, and then it becomes something. And that it's less a story that has a directionality as much as it is how energy in this thing moves. And so like that's the big thing. And so then if we zoom back down into like me, it's like, how coherent can I be within this body? And how much can I contribute to the local game, which is to basically to translate it into mythopoetic language I like is to help contribute to a renaissance that creates a type of communal coordination between people who choose to take the responsibility to wake the fuck up enough to actually contend with our existential risks and to try to produce actions that can improve our chances of survival by 0.1%. And that's the temporal game I'm bound in. But that's also enough of a game to focus on.
Yeah. Yeah, I definitely have also felt the pull of that macro not even multi-lifetime process, but just maybe even multi-species long process that it would take to get to this point of that view that you described as having the whole solar system proliferated with a kind of nature and consciousness and understanding. But that's definitely one of the big sort of mythological through lines of all of the like mushroom experiences I've ever had is when you do feel like you're getting those downloads, and I talk about the reprimanding, that's part of it. Is it as if I have any ability to really contribute to that more than one tiny microscopic angstrom of, propulsion toward that kind of a destiny for all of humankind or whatever comes after humankind. But that does that kind of like astro evolutionary story. Yeah, there's something deep inside me that thinks we're probably meant to be doing that in a very, very long time horizon. And to your point, that's going to take such deep levels of organizing and technological breakthroughs and purposefulness and just billions and millions of people executing over a long period of time. But as far-flung as that is, you're still keeping it physical. You're still keeping it in the plane of like, when you were describing, the atom, and then that's part of this, and that's part of this organ, and that's part of this organ system. And then you went above the human, and I thought you were going to go into the non-physical, but you stayed within the physical, which I do appreciate about you. But I also want to hear about your non-physical.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah.
When we, the fact that we can think atoms and we think that is only material, I think is one of the great achievements of a certain set of egregores that have existed in the last 100 years or so that has fucking hypnotized us. Like the atheist who can look out at this and has even a little bit of an understanding of the complexity of physics. The fact that they can feel self-righteous in their interpretation that this is material and it stops there. I personally think is hilarious. I think it's like thinking that because you took a class where you have learned how to make a surfboard that you understand the ocean. Like it's that much of a jump that we're just like, we don't see the jump. And so when I say like the one thing above human is like the family, I'm actually starting to talk about egregores. I'm starting to talk about archetypes. I'm starting to talk about whatever the thing is that we call epigenetics and how like your subjective felt sense of how the biological context exerted itself on you can actually change the way your child interprets reality who's not born yet, And so the words I used were a shorthand, but when I'm talking about this thing, I'm I'm curious if this happens to you. I've been exposed to enough different metaphysical maps that when I get into like a dream state or a non-ordinary state, I don't even know which maps I'm pulling from, but I can feel the influence of like Hinduism, Mahayana Buddhism, Plotinus, fucking Native American, like Alejo, this dude I know who's a living shaman who tells stories, and it's just like it all merges together. And so when I bring to mind the image sequence that I'm trying to articulate when I said the whole up and down frame by frame thing, afterlife, soul, daemons, guardian angels, demons, all that shit's woven through it, and it's so hard to articulate. It's like
It's because I think you're intellectually you care about your epistemology enough where you don't want people to take those symbols as what you're literally trying to say, because whatever it is so much crazier than we can even conceive of. And because of the fact that we are limited by our language, we literally can't talk about it, even though you can only talk about the shape of its shapelessness or something, And I abuse it so much because it's so good, and for the longest time I've been saying that it's Iamblichus who said this, but I think it's actually Proclus, who's another Neoplatonist theurgist sage. And it reminds me, again, everything we're talking about reminds me of this passage where he's talking about the theurgist, so meaning the person who's doing these like tantric rituals, basically to try to very similar to Yidam work in Tibetan Buddhism, where you're doing the devotional work to those images of gods or whatever, and you're trying to essentially almost download the loving kindness or whatever of one of those archetypal deities into yourself until you become it. I think it's probably similar to that. But one of the things he says is that the theurgist never sees the gods because the gods are actually these formless light beings that are like archetypal, and they're not, you can't visualize them. But because of what we are, there's something in our psyche that turns them into a symbol that we can understand.
For sure.
So it's not that it's just our psyche constructing the thing. It really is interfacing with this conglomeration of archetypal mental isness that is of some kind of order well above ours in some cases. In the theurgist case anyway, that's what they're reaching for. They're reaching for these transcendent, they're not just reaching for the personal daimon. That's presumably something they've understood for decades by the time they're doing this. But they're understanding that when I see this being coming to me, that both is the being and it's not the being. It's my symbol for the being, and your symbol for the same thing would be different than my symbol. And it's not because we're choosing it. It's because of what you're saying. It's because of you only have the concepts you have. So that thing has to inhabit a concept
for sure
that you have access to. Otherwise, how would it appear? And then it gets into interesting questions, like when you get into the really, really, really far out spaces of consciousness of like a breakthrough DMT dose or like really high dose ayahuasca, and you start to get into realms where it's like, I don't even know what I'm looking at. It's like but do you think that whatever that is, have you settled on whether you think you're glimpsing something separate from the self through those kinds of states? Or do you think that, again, that's just some really insane thing that could ultimately be reduced to neurochemistry? Or where are you sitting on that question these days?
Before I answer, I want to hear your guess. Which do you think it is?
I think you probably believe that there's ways to glimpse into, to stick a snorkel into the astral hierarchy or something.
Yes. Yeah. So I really like when you explain what you just explained, where you said a lot of Greek names / terms really quickly. That was very impressive. That made me want to make a joke, but it was because of how impressed I was. But let's just, like, the smart Greek people you referenced, how they say that there are essentially gods. And when we interface with them, we never interface with them directly, but the thing that is generated by us to comprehend the piece of them that we can comprehend is being stimulated by a genuine phenomenon of a other consciousness or point of view or whatever. That's always what I've believed. And I think I've been misunderstood by most of my friends, especially my spiritual ones, when I try to talk about it, but it's because I didn't have the smooth articulation there. But yes, I think one of the great, sophomoric philosophic tragedies that have to be digested is what is, called sophism or whatever.
Yeah.
Where you basically think, well, if I don't look, it's not there. And if I don't think it, everything's only here because I'm seeing it.
Oh yeah, like solipsistic.
Yes,
yeah.
So anyone who is trying to explore their inner nature will have to be confronted with how they choose to interpret that phenomenological truth. And I think it's what trips up a lot of young people into temporary psychosis, is because from a phenomenological, from a personal first person point of view, that is actually technically true. But if you stop there, you then totally break your soft animal body's requirement to connect with other people. And people who overcome that are people who basically, the big cure for me was, I can only think that thought when I'm not looking someone else in the eye. If I look someone else in the eye, there's this stronger, self-evident gnosis that sweeps through my body where it's like, no, it's not just me. So I think if people can jump over that hurdle in their self-exploration journey, then the next big thing is, every experience I've ever had, the direct imagistic event was generated by me, by my apparatus. So if I bump into a god, whatever my subjective experience is, it is it's my story making to try to comprehend something. And a lot of people get stuck there. And the totality of their spiritual life is basically they have a set of stories that they tell you. It's like, wow. And then a thing came down and I became Jesus and I started flying around and I fought the aliens. And it's like, but what is available is, to recognize that whatever the contents of those experiences are, they're like mythic dreams for you to work with if they still live in your memory as a way to deepen your conduct in life. Because really, I think the measure of someone's spiritual practice is how do they behave and how do they treat other people. I'm sure almost everyone listening can agree with me. We are tired of hearing people's stories about what they saw. It's like, cool. We all see a bunch of crazy shit. What are you doing? What's your current craft? How do you serve people? How do you live? How do you treat your partner? I would love for there to be some type of AI program that keeps people from posting about ayahuasca if it can sense that they don't talk to their parents and that they treat their partner badly.
Yeah, right.
It's like, yo, we don't care.
Right.
It's like, how do you behave?
And on that note, I'm sure you've met some people who claim to be, in a very untethered way where you instantly know it's not true. I'm talking about this kind of a person who claims to have some kind of ability, some kind of dharma, some kind of fate, anointment, whatever.
For sure.
And they're clearly the worst kind of just
100%.
not well-adjusted, psycho, self-aggrandizing
The best
person.
way to
Yeah.
identify those people is they tell you what their gift is when they meet you.
Right.
It's like, you want to know what a genuinely good person doesn't do is tell you they're a good person the first time they meet you.
Right. Yeah.
You want to know what someone who's not an asshole does when they first meet you? They don't tell you that they're not an asshole.
Yeah.
You know? And so if you meet me and the first thing you're telling me is like your gift,
Yeah.
it's like, homie, I can't wait to find a way to politely end this conversation and never talk to you.
Right. Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
But so, what I have found is that when I open myself up to there being other phenomenon that's beyond space-time, ultimately at the end of the day, what it does is it humbles me. It makes me more compassionate to other people because it's like, guys, we have no fucking idea what's going on and you're just as lost as me. And for whatever reason, we live in the density and the free and the pace of time where we can have ouchies, like really big ouchies. And so it's like, you know, it's like, I really love the frame of what if this is hell, but we actually all chose to invade hell to liberate it. And that we have actually forgotten that we sent ourselves here to help everyone else here wake up. And then, and so that's a very dramatic way to talk about, like, ultimately what my experiences have taught me how to do is to just really appreciate being with beings, especially if they're sad.
Yeah.
You know, like, really, I think what all of my psychedelic experiences has taught me is it has taught me how to doula people into crying. Like that, like basically my career is I help people cry.
Isn't it so interesting?
Like what I do.
Isn't it so interesting that there's that kind of cathartic healing crying that that is like a microcosm, like a microcosmic emotional explosion of the exact thing we avoid, but that is actually the exact thing that we need.
100%.
You know, it's like,
man.
it's funny how it's one of those things that is just,
we're the only creature
as soon as it's
that
done, that instant just, you just feel 100%. Like you cathartically burnt some shit off.
100%.
That is such an amazing feeling.
This is a great tie back. You know, so I say I go get my teeth cleaned every, few months. The daily brushing of the teeth is to have at least a moment a day where a tear comes out. And honestly, like, I cried last night. I came home and I started.
You were so stoked to see me today.
I was so excited. Yeah. I was like, I'm going to get to see him again and we're going to get to make inappropriate jokes before the camera. No. So I was excited to see you, but it didn't bring me to tears yet. But I actually was brought to tears probably twice on this talk already. You know, it wasn't like a big boohoo, but like I can feel when the thing happens. But like I was playing a game on PlayStation 5. I just started Expedition 33.
Yeah.
And it was just like, and I haven't played a good video game in a long time, and just to see where it's come and the music, and like, I could feel that I was crying for the artists who put in the time to just make something gorgeous and like beautiful.
Or cry for the kid that's going to be their hero's journey initiation.
100%.
Because I know you and I both have that in ways that still, to this day, like move me to an unbelievable place that I could start crying right now. Like the very, I think we've talked about this before, but the very first thing for me like that was probably an RPG.
Same,
like it was
dog.
Playing Lunar on Sega CD. the first like Japanese RPG. Yeah, man, that game to this day, I still have the like big jewel case Sega CD game. Yeah, that's like a sacred tome to me.
Yeah, dude, I think it's really underappreciated what RPGs did for kids in the 90s. You know, because like one of the things that constantly like rhythmically blows my mind when I start to read more and more books that kind of like talk about history and how things have played out is like, if you grew up in America in the 90s, anything like how I grew up, the totality of the input of culture was whatever was on mainstream radio, whatever was on mainstream, like the basic, like 58 channels that you got on cable. And that was it. And it was such a congested simulacrum fucking veneer of plastic.
Yeah,
like,
yeah. Everybody's talking like this on the radio. Here's the same song you heard 7 times already today. Yeah.
And where in hindsight, it's like a tremendous amount of the music produced was produced by, you know, by like people, like the gatekeepers that got to pick who got to be shown were people who were using that position to abuse people. And then you turn to movies and you turn to TV shows, the same shit was happening. Like, there are many documentaries about what was happening at Nickelodeon, you know, and then people like Harvey Weinstein. And so just like the significance of the fact that I read books, which is something that, you know, statistically a very small amount of people actually do. But the big one that I haven't seen anyone really try to like study was the massive developmental and like mythic cultivation that I got from playing RPGs.
Yeah.
Like a massive amount of my lexicon for the names of gods and goddesses and like mythic weapons and mythic heroes and heroines came from basically Final Fantasy VIII, Final Fantasy IX, and Final Fantasy X. Like huge education.
Huge for me too.
And like real mythic content. And like, man, I remember probably the greatest tragedy of my young life before, before hormones started to make the opinion of girls the most important and most shattering thing possible.
Right.
Like right before that started, I had beat Kingdom Hearts, the first one. I'm watching the ending that I've just earned, and my grandma is yelling for me to come downstairs. And back then I couldn't pause it and I couldn't replay it because there wasn't YouTube. And so I ignore her, and then she yells harder, and then weeping, I leave my room as Mickey Mouse is about to go do whatever he's about to do with the ice that you just unlocked or something.
I actually never played Kingdom Hearts, but
incredible. It's definitely the closest. There was something about the music that really like hooked my 12-year-old heart, where it was like, it's my destiny to free Sora from whatever the thing is. Yeah. I go downstairs and my grandma's complaining about someone not refilling the ice cubes. And I've never hated a human more. I was like 12 years old, and I'm missing the ending of this book. You know, it's like reading a book and you get to the last chapter and you have to burn the page.
Yeah, right.
Because you can't just re-experience it. You have to refight the hardest boss fight in the entire thing. But yeah, long diatribe short. I think crying like is probably the most practical thing that we're avoiding as a people because of the pace of our culture and the fact that everyone listening to this would rather check their phone than just be in the bathroom, going to the bathroom without anything.
Yeah.
And it's just like, most people listening to this, the last 100 times they've gone to the bathroom, they've been on their phones.
Yeah. Or if you haven't had your phone, all you thought about is how you didn't have your phone.
Right. And just like how it was like, this is my Greek tragedy moment, is I don't have this phone for this incredible dump that I'm about to experience.
The raw dogging life is the big thing now.
It's so funny. Yeah. It's like 1990 in life, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, man. I just, there's so many ways to focus in on the importance of this. I feel like we've pretty much done it justice. One of two things. We could continue going down the rabbit hole of your sort of most important initiatory experiences. And although I agree with a lot of what you said about like, we don't need to hear your like stories about seeing weird shit. We've all seen weird shit. I do like a good seeing crazy shit
For
story,
sure. Yeah.
but I don't like it to just kind of like beat a dead horse more. I really don't like it when it's unaccompanied by like a person who's not well adjusted and is out of
Yeah.
touch with their daily settling into their being in a responsible way, like you were getting at. So we can either continue down that, or we can take a hard pivot into something like aliens. It's up to you.
Hard pivot.
Let's go.
Hard
Because
pivot.
I know. So that's something that you, when you saw Age of Disclosure recently, you were just holy shit,
Yeah.
and I was like, yep, yeah. Was there anything specifically about Age of Disclosure that really like ignited something for you, or was it the whole kind of general?
Yeah. So, my disposition on aliens for most of my life has been a Jungian interpretation, where
Yeah.
essentially the alien phenomenon is 100% not physical. 100% there aren't, like humans on this planet or things that are shaped like humans, because again, my understanding of evolution is the statistical likelihood of a independently evolving species on any other planet. For it to look anything like us is so statistically low, it might as well be zero. And so it always has just landed in me as like, yo, this is a convenient interpretation of a function of a culture that's mythically injured, where
Yeah.
like the average person has no idea how to cognate mythically and not just instantly collapse it into either the mythic must be literal or it's meaningless. And it's like, that's just like, read some motherfucking Jung, start to work with your dreams, and so so my disposition has been cavalier, and then I have been seeing like your channel blow the fuck up over the last like year or so, and a lot of what I was seeing like doing super well was aliens, and I was like, is there more happening here than I thought? And then I started paying attention to some of your podcasts, and it was like, there is so much more going on here. And it for sure opened up my mentality on this. And then, a couple of years ago, I had a genuine extra or UAP experience, and I've told you the story, right?
Wait, I don't remember this actually.
No way. Where I did mushrooms and I was looking up at the sky and then I saw
tell
the
the story
first star.
again. Yeah.
Okay. So,
I remember this now, but yeah.
In hindsight, this perfectly fits into like what, a lot of these people are saying, but essentially I was with a group of homies. We were camping outside and we did some mushrooms, and it wasn't a big dose. It was like 3.5 for me. And I was laying on my back. Graham was actually there, and I was looking up at the sky, and the way my field of vision was like the whole left of my field of vision was the canopy of a big tree. And then my entire right field of vision was just a big open Texas sky. And as the mushrooms are coming up, I see the first star of the evening, and I think to myself, wow, the first star. And then as soon as I think that thought, it starts to move. And then my very next thought is, wow, I'm high. And then as soon as I think that thought, my subjective experience is that the light that looked like a star looked at me and made eye contact. Like that was the subjective feeling of like a wild animal being like, and it felt like I was like, and then my subjective experience was that it looked at me and then turned up the intensity of the mushroom feeling to basically say like, yo, this is the mushroom. This is me, bitch. Like that was kind of it didn't say bitch. It actually felt very like, sweet, but it was just like, it was almost like just trying to make it clear. Like, no, yes. And then as soon as that happened, my next thought, and this all happened like,
right.
My third thought was, oh, wow, this is a Jungian experience. And then as soon as I thought that, two more stars pop up in the sky, like behind it. And so now it's like two and then one. And then this was the moment where I had enough metacognition to be like, Erick, you're thinking way too much. Just drop back and let this become whatever it wants to be. And so as soon as I like drop back and allow it to become what it wants to be, the leading star does like a little twirl in the sky. And what it felt like it told me, like what it felt like it was communicating to me was, you don't have to do it alone. Because I was really struggling with existential risk at that time in my life, like to the point where it was kind of like breaking my will to try and to care.
Like literally just thinking about like the fate of humanity being.
Yeah, like I can show you, but I have a mind map on a program on my computer that I was working on when I lived with Graham right before we did this experience that I had put like a month of work into, where it's like 120, like, biological evolution, RNA, DNA, this event, and then scaling all the way up to like, how to build a new democracy, how to have a new type of, UN. And I like, because when I first got exposed to existential risk theory, it broke my capacity to see a vision of the future that would propel me to try. And I hadn't, like, I almost unalived myself, not actively, but by not doing anything in my early 20s because I broke my brain using psychedelics. I had to put it back together. A fundamental part of putting it back together is I had to have a vision for the future that I could really believe in.
Yeah.
And that carried me for like 9 years. And then I found out Daniel Schmachtenberger and I watched like 3 or 4 of his interviews.
You got Schmachtenbergered.
Shattered. Just Schmachten shattered. It really disoriented my life. And so then I became obsessed with trying to put some new story together that I could, care again and try again. And so at like the peak of this struggle, this is when I'm on this camping trip. And so the first thing it said was like, you don't have to do it alone, with the felt sense of like, there are other things trying to make this work.
Wow.
And then the next thing it said was, and it can be fun. And that's when it did the little wee.
Awesome.
And it was like sweet. And like, it was a simultaneous, like extreme show of force, like of its power.
Yeah.
That it could like physically like grab my consciousness and manipulate the intensity of the mushroom. And also like, wee.
A show of whimsy.
A show of whimsy.
A show of whimsy and force.
That's exactly what it was.
Yeah,
it was a show of force and a show of whimsy.
That's so fascinating because that really maps well onto what most people who have some kind of UFO experience have. They see some kind of light, some kind of orb thing appear. They see it do impossible things from a physics standpoint. And then they often have some kind, if they do have a mental connection, it's something kind of like that. It's deep, it's existential, it's almost like spiritual or holy. And it's very much not like what is described in movies like Age of Disclosure. And although I do talk about this, this milieu, the UFO topic, and the nuts and bolts stuff and the physics stuff and the legacy program and all these things they talk about does interest me. To me, that also feels like this lore, this like bubble of lore that is still, and it very well may be true. I'm not saying it's not true and I don't believe it, but if you really step back from it, it's this lore that's being told by a very small number of people for the most part that are within the government, that are within the military industrial complex. They're coming forward saying they know things, but we can't tell you everything. But it's coming and it's going to be slow and whatever. But then you never, you start paying attention. And I've been paying attention, I would say, even before the 2017 New York Times article where they first started talking about the Nimitz and all these things that they kind of recover in Age of Disclosure. But I've been paying attention more and more and more, and I've been getting more and more integrated into that kind of scene and going to events and stuff. And I am very reluctant to get too close to that narrative, not because I don't think it could be true, but because I think you're so capped on what you can know and so reliant on someone else to tell you what must be true. Because I can't control the shit Lou Elizondo talks about. Like he's talking about, you know, bodies and crafts that might be in some deep underground military base or some secret Lockheed facility or whatever. And like, yeah, if that's true, I want to know that, but I also can't like live my life trying to pursue that shit because I can't get there. Like it is foundationally created for nobody at this table or listening right now to be able to get to that information. You know, like you can't go in there, you're going to go in there and Mission Impossible your way to seeing a body. Like, no, you're not. Yeah. And then what anyway? Okay, so there's a guy who came from another planet, basically. Yeah. Like, to me, and I'm totally straw manning it because I do think the physics conversation is interesting. I do think the nuts and bolts, the energy stuff, all of that is very interesting to me, but I'm way more interested in the consciousness. So, like, how can that, and yeah, you could, if you wanted to straw man your experience, be like, he was on mushrooms. For sure. And he says 3 grams is a lot. I'd say 3 I say that's a significant amount. But you know, you could do that. You could straw man it and say it was that kind of an experience. But as someone who's had those experiences myself, I think those are heightened experiences, if anything. And I think whatever that experience was, probably, I think my most parsimonious explanation is you experienced exactly what it seemed like you experienced. You probably opened your Umwelt, your psychical capacities enough to perceive something else that was there, at least from a psychical perspective, that you were able to connect with. And I think that stuff is so much more important. The sort of like, again, in the scene, what's becoming colloquially known as CE5 or psionic contact with something else, right? And because those are the things that can really change your life. Like those are the understandings, the knowings, the almost like anamnesis level things that you can unlock where it's a deep kind of knowing that roots down in your being where you're like, oh yeah, it's not like me saying, hey buddy, you're not alone, it's okay. It's the opposite of that. It's knowing that somehow. Yeah. And those are the things that can be communicated in those kinds of states and those kinds of experiences that for me still does, as much as I'm into the lore, still eclipses that for me, you know?
So a few things here. One, the end of the story is that after that experience happened and I really like basked in the like, wow, I just had my first alien experience. As soon as it moved to a place in the sky where it became eclipsed by the canopy of the tree, as soon as it disappeared, my mind went, that was such a cool Jungian, like I instantly collapsed it back into my Jungian frame, which basically meant it wasn't a true external independent other. As soon as I have that thought, it peeks out from one of the leaves with the instantaneous felt effect like, brother, really?
Yeah.
Like as soon as I walk out of the room, you're like, he wasn't here. And it was that moment that like, reconfigured something in me permanently.
Wow.
It was just like, and it was just the fact that like, maybe that's coincidence, but the amount of coincidences to produce a subjective gnosis to change my lens is of, you know, one of Jung's quote is another name for his God is chance. And so regardless of how I wanted to look at it, it's like, that just changed something inside of me. Now to get to the point you were making, the main reason that documentary like fundamentally like woke me up to this in a way that nothing else has is from a game theory standpoint, there's either this is, you know, completely made up, or the people who organize this are sincere, you know?
Those are the two far ends of the spectrum, at least. There's a lot of fun little possibilities in between, I think, but continue. Yeah.
Yeah. Like for the sake of like the math, you know, it's like if you had to express this as a mathematical equation, you would basically put like complete true and then, you know, some symbol for spectrum of a combination of the two, and then complete dishonest, deceit, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Regardless of the polls, the fact that there is enough of a energy here to get people to coordinate with each other that it would produce 34 military or governmental agents
Yeah.
is a coordinating magnet in this space that I didn't fucking know this space had.
Right.
And I was like, regardless of what the truthiness of this is, there is a here that is so monumental that it changes my worldview. And so if it's dishonest, it definitely is a play to be leveraged for, like, if this is dishonest, they are cultivating a card to play.
Right.
That would
it's some
be
crazy geopolitical
massive.
Yeah.
Like, I shudder to think about what that play would be. 2 is like the thing in that documentary that really stuck out to me was the list of the physics of the phenomenon of the things that multiple people have recorded saying that they've seen on radar. And I don't know how true it is because I don't know how to read the radar, but
right. Yeah. See, it's like these are the things that frustrate me is we're constantly being told like it did these things and then they show us this grainy footage and it's like we don't even know what we're looking at on the footage.
Yeah, like is there any third-party fact checker?
Yeah, and I mean there has been, and I'm, again, kind of straw manning it, but yes, continue. I don't want to derail you.
So one of the things to connect to is the foundation of your argument for why you aren't super into this is because the structure of the disclosure is not open sourced. And reality, like, that is not a metric for whether or not something is true. Because there are definitely insincere peoples who conspire that have some truth behind a wall and it's not open sourced, you know? And so that, like, this, I totally agree with you that the open source nature of the lore, or not lore, it seems like you have lore is like what the Age of Disclosure is about, and then I think you said CE5. It's kind of the open source.
That's like they go have mental contact with it, like see if you can. So Stephen Greer, he's like a big filmmaker in this space. He was the one who coined that term. Put out an app, and basically it was a way to go out with people and try to what's interesting too is I didn't realize this is apparently, at least this is what Adam Curry told me, apparently they actually chant Sanskrit, or at least some people chant Sanskrit to drop into the space of whatever that energy is.
That's cool.
So I don't know if that's like an express direction in what he tells people to do, but apparently that's at least what some people do. And that actually made me like it more. I was like, oh yeah, I want to go out into the desert and like chant Sanskrit and see if lights show up. But I mean, isn't that so? I mean, if a press release came out from Lockheed Martin tomorrow and said there's a gray alien in a basement somewhere, would that have more impact on you, or would it have more impact on you to like go out into the desert and like actually have some shit appear and like interact with your mind, I mean, for me, it would be the latter. I'm not saying the former is nothing. I would still be like, holy shit, oh my God. And I'd like start streaming right away or something. But still, man, I mean, I think they're both, and I think they're both could be true. I don't think it's one or the other. I don't think there's a strict dichotomy where it's like, it's either ultra-terrestrials / non-physical beings, or it's the nuts and bolts physical beings from other planets flew here. I think it could be both, or it could be neither. I still don't know, but I know we have more agency over one than the other, which is a big part of it for me.
So, like, one of the things that I really enjoy is I really like to watch people speak what they believe and actually like get to see the micro movements of their face, because everyone thinks they're above average at being able to read people, and I definitely think that I am.
Yeah.
And my somatic experience of watching The Age of Disclosure and just feeling the volume of people speaking, and the complete lack of heebie-jeebie, like, I don't fucking trust you, from, I mean, as far as I can recall, almost anyone. A couple of people felt polished, you know?
Right.
But there was no one that came off as like, yuck, which is not the case when I watch a lot of documentaries. That was big for me, just to like feel, you know, because your question was, would it be more impactful for you to go have an experience like that or for you to read in the newspaper? Well, before watching The Age of Disclosure, I had the experience out, and I've done a lot of drugs, as we have talked about on this podcast. But seeing a 2-hour-long documentary with over 20 people who still have reputations in the public sphere, you know, because like one of the things about conspiracy thinking that annoys me is I don't feel like people who cast out conspiratorial interpretations of things often give credit to the risk of the individuals who are a part of it, that they're risking their reputation. And that's not to say that people don't fucking do that, because they do. But like, when the first thought is to discard the thing, you know, where like there's a whistleblower or there's someone who comes forth and there's like 5 people and they use their real state name.
When they have something to lose, and all these people have something to lose. Yeah.
And so, for me personally, especially because I haven't been deep in this space, it's really funny. Like the people who I know, like I was just telling you about my friend Christian, he's deep in this stuff and he's been tracking UFO stuff way more than me. And he said that he like watched like 1/4 of The Age of Disclosure. And he was like, man.
Right. Yeah, because it's essentially a really well done retelling, mostly, of things that were already out there. And like you said, it's assembling. I'm like the dude who didn't
watch the anime, and then when I watched the movie and it recaps the season, I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah, right. Yeah, it is kind of like that, where it's been this gritty, and that's, I mean, dude, there's been great filmmakers like in the UFO space for a long time, like you know, James Fox and all these other people who have put out really good documentaries over the years, but yeah, this felt like a moment, but it also kind of, to me, feels like the end of a type of disclosure, because, you know, all the people who are in that documentary have been around, like Lou Elizondo and Chris Mellon and
get 'em.
You know, all those guys. They've been around. They've been on the big podcasts. They've been in front of Congress. They've been beating this drum for a while, and it sort of feels like the best telling. It's like the best version of something they've been doing for a long time now. And then it begs the question, okay, so now what? You know, it seems like you kind of pushed all the chips you're willing to push out. And until we get to something that is concrete and is beyond, and then there's a lot of pieces of lore and stumbles that occurred. There's all this kind of stuff that have created this noise of, do we trust these people? Are they being genuine? Do they mean to do that, or was it just an accident? And there's all, you know, and then there's UFO Twitter just like cannibalizing itself and attacking people. And there's that whole vibe that's been going on in the background the whole time. So my point basically is that you've got this whole information sphere, and there are people who are like really deep into that, and there are people who are more casual watchers of that. And this is easily the best thing that's come out for people who are casually interested or are not interested, or were not previously interested. And for those kinds of people, I think that felt like a moment, and like we're on the brink of something. And I think everybody who's like been in it for a while is like, welcome, sit down, because it's going to be a while. And if we're not even sure what the fuck's real, and this person doesn't think that person's genuine, and that person hates this person, and this person hates that person, and then you start getting pulled into the cesspool, and you're like, oh man, it's like this in here. But then it's also addicting, because it is like the biggest question, right? Like, are we alone? What are these things if we're not alone? Are they physical? Are they not physical? Are they ultra-terrestrial? Are they extraterrestrial? Are they both? Are they a breakaway civilization? You know, and it's like, it's fun though.
Yeah.
And it's always compelling, and I always want to know more, and there's always cool people to meet, and crazy people to listen to, and I don't see myself pulling out of it. You know, I've seen people I really respect be like, I can't do this. Like, like Bernardo Kastrup, you know, the idealist philosopher.
Yeah.
You have to know Bernardo, but yeah, he's like Don Hoffman, basically. He's like a Don Hoffman level intellect, who is another idealist philosopher, very well known, been in a lot of big podcasts, wrote a bunch of books. He became very interested in the UFO topic, and he's like, I can't do it. It's too epistemically messy. Like you can't get your hands around anything here. And that's true, but it's also too, it's like, what else am I going to be interested in? You know, it's like,
the interesting thing is like, there's a hilarity of a idealist philosopher being upset that he can't get his hands around.
That is true. That is true.
What I mean? It's like,
yeah,
Doc, have you looked at your philosophy? It's the nature of it. Yeah, the thing that you brought up that was super interesting to me, where like it made my skin crawl from like a game theory dynamics standpoint, which is this documentary, The Age of Disclosure, is going to increase the public pressure on Congress to pass a bill that will allow the government to claim which corporations have quote unquote government property, where they can then seize really advanced technology, claiming that it's alien tech, you know, because what that line of thinking suggests is that there are crafts and there is tech on this planet that seems to be able to do things that our current set of physics can't explain. And that private corporations own this or have this tech, you know, as it lays out in the film. And that the big thing, you know, that like, well, what I think the point of this documentary is, whether it's true or false or some mix of the two, is just trying to put pressure to get a bill passed.
Yeah.
To give some branches of government the capacity to seize assets from unknown defense contractors. And that to me seems like.
Yeah, that would be huge. Yeah. If it does happen, it would be huge. Yeah. And there's still a large part of me that thinks it's probably true, or some version of the truth, or a polished version that contains a lot of truth.
Do you mean sincere?
Yeah.
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 You know, because it's up in the air about whether or not it's true. You know, like it's true that there are crafts and biologics from other planets. It could be there's true that there are at least craft that can do things that our current set of physics can't do. And then it can be true in the sense that everything they said was sincere, but when they go and look at the actual thing, there's not anything there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I just wanted to clarify.
Or it could be like, I mean, there's so many versions of this. Like, there's so many rabbit holes to go down. Like, one fun one is that this is a false pretense to get at the technology, right? Like that this technology is being cloistered within these defense contractors. There's this whole hidden branch of propulsion.
That's what I meant by the whole thing I just shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not aliens. It's that there's actual tech that people have that's not from off planet. It's just being kept, and the government wants it.
Yeah, and just to like explain this for anybody who's not quite putting all these pieces together, I'm not saying that this is the case, but
he's not saying you're stupid.
but I just don't feel like we walked through it. Like what I'm proposing, and this isn't my original idea, by the way. What I'm proposing is that what if one potential scenario is that the whole alien story is a false pretense to get at world-changing technologies that people could then monetize, that currently are just wrapped up in classified, you know, lockers inside of, you know, the laundry list, like Boeing, Lockheed, blah, blah, blah. And they've been suppressed because they want to keep those technologies for themselves, but they also they want to slowly trickle it out and take advantage of it over the course of many, many years. But if we could get Congress in there and get oversight in there, we could claw some of that back, and then it would go back out into the public sphere and make a lot of people rich. Like that's a very plausible scenario to me, at least. I'm not saying that's what it is. And I think another equally possible scenario is like, what if it's not technology at all? What if this narrative is completely made to distract from that other narrative, like what you experienced? Because having those kinds of experiences completely nullifies your need for a religious authority, for a government to tell you what's real, to what you should focus on. It doesn't really make you want to be like
that's a good point.
A McDonald's franchise owner or whatever, you know, like whatever, like it. So
that's a good point.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's interesting how like there's, so much more of the epistemological walling, you know, like if you imagine your worldview is like Attack on Titan and you're inside the walls, there's just been a lot of attacks on the wall. And like we were talking about earlier, I feel like I'm really sensing a lot of my peers who have like been interested in like the spiritual space, but you know, don't have the whatever you want to call it to like stay with the unknown.
Yeah.
Go back into a type of like, you know, a new type of Christianity where on the face of it, they're like Jesus, you know, like just be like Jesus. But whenever I press them, there's a lot of implicit like fundamentalism that creeps back in. And yeah, I'm just really appreciating how if I was in
It feels
that
like a new
reality
stance to
tunnel,
spiritual bypass in is kind of what
100%. It's like instead of like spiritual bypassing for a lot of people as they try to float over the problem, it's almost like spiritual foxholing. Where it's like, let me go find a comfortable, dated, monotheistic religion that has rituals and values that I can really anchor to. And let me either be completely ignorant to the executable behavioral movements of this tradition on peoples for the last few hundred years, or let me forgive it.
Yeah.
And then just, you know, carry my conveniently internal image of Jesus as a white dude and just pretend like that's absolutely, you know, appropriate.
Yeah.
And just not contend with the weirdy squigglies of 2025 onward. But anyways, what I was appreciating was just how demonstrably destructive the UFO experience I had would have been if I was one of those people.
Yeah.
And so I really do understand that if there is, I can see the motivation behind the current governmental order wanting there to be a documentary like this to create a clear enemy that, like, you know, the populist new Christian movement can be like, that's demonic or that's,
right.
you know.
Yeah.
I don't know. I clearly have some stuff to work out with my peers who have gotten back into Christianity in a way where it just feels like.
And it's a specific type of Christianity. It's not, we're not just like sitting here bashing anybody who is under that banner collectively. It's a kind of Christianity that feels like, just like you said, it feels like a retreat into a kind of overly simplified sense making. It's an overly simplified knee-jerk sense making move where it's just like, this is too complicated and whatever, so I'm just going to go back to this instead of meeting head on all the uncertainty
that was unknown, everything that they were contending with when they were in a more like, you know, quote unquote spiritual movement type of place, that entire thing gets washed as demonic.
Right, exactly. And that's just happening a lot in the UFO space.
Huge swathing of just like anything that is a fundamental epistemological mystery, demonic.
Yeah.
And it's that thing where it's like, yo, homie, I've snorted MDMA with you in a bathroom. And we've talked about all the things that are possible in this world and dreams and like, I see you.
Yeah.
And this is at best a rest stop.
Yeah.
You are not going to find peace and solace here, you know? And it's like, when you're ready, it's safe out here. You don't have to snort MDMA anymore, but you also don't have to completely castrate your curiosity.
Well said.
You know, from like, in my opinion, if we're going to get through the next 100 years, one of the major check marks we're going to have to figure out is how to create a new religion that is able to completely sync up with the scientific method, but is able to bring in the things that monotheism has shown is nutrients to the human soul. But it's like, yo, airplanes work. You know, so like, let's square the math that makes airplanes work with the fact that like there's something that happens after you die there's something beyond you that cares about you, that's trying to guide you.
This is why I'm a Platonist. It just puts it all together. It's like highly emphasizes like the importance of the rational, having a solid academic, hard background in education, but then taking that and meeting the mystery in non-ordinary states of consciousness, having, you know, primary anamnesises of like deep kinds of remembering, having, you know, states of consciousness that go above even your dianoia, your logical, rigorous mind, into these direct kinds of knowing that we were talking about before, like, you know, noesis, as they would call it. Like, it's just all there, man.
But the big thing that it's missing is that there is no one taking a stand to create community and ritual that brings groups of people together and gives them a coherent sense-making story.
Not anymore. Yeah.
Right. And so it, like, a part of the, like, the thing, like, it's really interesting. It's like, before, like, when I grew up on Walmart food, I didn't know what it felt like to just not be constantly inflamed from fake food and way too much sugar. And then once I felt my nervous system, like, churning smoothly, and just the, like, you know, it changes things. I think there is a function of psychological nourishment that we only get from small human in-person group sense-making, where there's a complete alignment with where are we going, and how do we get there? And that in a westernized atomic nuclear family culture, the only thing that's gotten close to that outside of religion are things that we call cults. Yeah. Because there's like a thing, there's like a light going on over there, and we're like, oh, but then the people who are inside of it are like, oh, this is me not having chronic inflammation for the first time. It's like there's a thing being activated in this community that is creating something that I now know everyone on the outside is like malnourished, and there's just like, salt's bad, you know, and they don't even recognize that they're dehydrated.
Right.
I think one of the things that monotheism has done better than fucking any aggregor in history is that cult dimension of like, here are rituals and games we can play together that give us a coherent sense of where are we going, and how do we get there? And I think it, like, there's a great quote from one of the founders of family therapy, and I forget her name, but she says, the idea of the individual human being is a lie. There's no such thing as an individual human being. We are these nets and webs of our relationships to other people, and all of our wounds have happened in relationship. All of our healing will happen in relationship. I don't think that's actually technically the case. I think there is a dimension of healing that only happens subjectively,
I agree.
But it's not as poetic, man. So just let me cook. Just let them cook. But so I think the retreat into any of these older religions, we're fundamentally missing the operating system that could synthesize with the experimental method. So it's just not an option. But that doesn't mean that we can't take the best of, for example, of like Christ's teachings.
Right.
But it's like, can we create a boat where Christ is on the boat and the experimental method is on the boat, and we don't subjugate women, and we don't, you know, use Christ's name to commit jihad or, you know, crusades by some other name, or use him to invade a country that doesn't have nuclear like, can we make a new boat? That Christ can come on. But the current boat, which is kind of like the church and the different denominations of that, it's like, the Vatican has fucked up too much good art. We got to open up the coffers, you know? Yeah. And so my prayer for anyone listening to this is that if you have foxholed yourself back into, you know, old monotheistic religion, I hope an alien finds you.
Bro, that's the best way to end this. Love you.
Love you too.